Today on the show, I'm very excited for our guest. It's how meta this conversation is because, like, all the years have passed. I grew up watching our guest on television, Mr. Michael Gross, and have seen him periodically through time when I lived in Santa Fe, coming into the Target there to shop, just living life. Uh, but now with today's technology, just having an easy, fun chat here about his life and career. Michael, thanks for hanging out today. I appreciate your time, and I'm excited to chat with you for sure.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure, Brett.
Well, this is crazy because, as I said, I've watched you on television and film. Tremors, obviously, what an iconic thing that is. And I was reading your social media. There's a Tremors Fest in Santa Fe in October. It, I know you've been a part of this franchise forever. We had Jamie Kennedy on a while ago. He was part of the franchise, and you came up in the conversation. It was during COVID. He's like, "Have you ever spoken with Michael?" And I said, "No, we haven't. We've haven't gotten that far yet, but here we are now." Talk about, I know it's not until October, but what is that festival about? It seems like the fan base for this franchise has just is got its life of its own,
Well,
really,
it
which is
it it does, and I should preface this by saying that Tremors was never the original Tremors was never a huge success at the box office.
no, I
It,
remember seeing it in theaters. It was
it was
just
out for about 10 minutes,
yeah,
and I'm happy I saw it when I did on the big screen because as much as anything, it's fun to go to a film like that and hear the audience's reaction to things, just what works and what doesn't work and all that sort
yeah.
of thing. So, but I saw it a couple times on the big screen, 30 odd years ago. And it really found its life in the aftermarket videos, VHSs in those days. And ever since, of course, on DVD. And now can be found on demand too in many places. But it did take off and did have a life of its own. It just took a while to get there. Um, and It turns out that I have become an acquaintance of living in Santa Fe, George Martin, the Game of Thrones
Yeah.
dude. And, uh, and George is an amazing guy. And the first time we met, it was about something entirely different. But he mentioned he was a huge Tremors fan. And it was really his idea to start this Tremors Film Festival. And this will be the second year. So George is really the impetus behind it. And he loved the first one and said, "Hey, why don't we show all of them?" And
That's
once
so
we got,
cool.
yeah, why don't we have a weekend devoted to Tremors? So last year was the first time this happened. It was in April last year. And for various scheduling reasons, it didn't work out to be spring this year. And it's now been pushed to October of this year. I want to say the 11th, 12th, 13th, something like that,
Yeah.
in October in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Among other things, George owns a movie theater there, has partnership with another guy who owns a multi-screen theater there and a multiplex. And there's also going to be something special this year because there's a little town about 18 miles from Santa Fe that may very well stand in for Perfection, Nevada. It's got a little, it's got a little
Oh
tiny
wow.
little main street and bar and a restaurant and things like this. And so George wants. This is as much as I know now because I'm not intimately involved with the planning. But as far as I know, he wants to everybody to get on a train, which he also owns, in downtown Santa Fe, and ride the 18 miles to this little town south of Santa Fe, and watch. I think the idea is to have Tremors 2 on the big screen in this little town. And so they're setting up a screen and all this in October. And I just hope the weather holds. Bring a scarf just in case. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know in Santa Fe in October. Well, I live
Yeah,
in Colorado, so I get it. I mean, we're in May right now, and I mean, it could snow tomorrow,
right.
potentially.
I've
Um,
I grew up in Chicago, so I understand that we have the same kind of weather. You could get a spring snow very, very easily. Um, and I will say that this second festival, though, well, the first one had to do a lot with the seven original films. This will also, we hope, have a focus on some of the series.
Yeah.
The short-lived television series for, who do we do it for? I think it was um, oh, I forget. Anyway, it
Was
was
it sci-fi
oh,
that it was on? I'm trying to
sci-fi.
remember.
That's right. It was
Yeah, I
sci-fi.
remember when that came out. Um, I mean, I've been a fan of the series. Last summer or 2 summers ago, they
Right.
showed Tremors 1 and 2 at the drive-in theater here in Loveland.
Oh, what fun!
Um, oh, you have no idea how fun
It's a
that was.
perfect drive-in movie film. It's perfect.
In fact, I think, let's see, I'm turning 50 this year, so I'm trying to remember. I remember when the series came out, you mentioned something interesting about that world that once existed where movies would come out, they would be in theaters, but then that DVD release or VHS release or Betamax, I think even was like where the butter and bread was for those films because whether it be financially or just like people catching and it becoming a cult classic. You came from Chicago. I was doing research on you and just your life and things. What was the driving force to get you from Chicago to LA? Were you doing things in Chicago first before you went to Los Angeles, if I
Um,
understand correctly?
right. What I did in Chicago was theater. I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago and met an incredible teacher there who became a mentor, my first real acting teacher, uh, a lifelong friend, and 40 years ago, the best man at my wedding. I mean, he passed away about 2 years ago, and it's still a great loss in my life. He was a wonderful, wonderful man who just, I was in one of my first plays there at the University of Illinois, and it was kind of a lark how I got into it. And I, uh, I kind of fell in love with it as I did with him, and as I said, he became a longtime friend. And so that he, after undergrad, he encouraged me to get further acting skills, and I was mainly interested in the theater in those days rather than film or television. And I went to the School of Drama at Yale University, and uh, among its some of its other people are, well, Meryl Streep, Sigourney Weaver, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
I think Sigourney was a year behind me, and Meryl was maybe 1 or 2 years behind me. And and so I was I went from there to regional theaters in Louisville, Kentucky, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, back at Yale as part of the Yale Repertory Theater, and then worked and when finally went into New York and did Broadway, off Broadway, several films, movies of the week, that sort of thing, and some television, and was hired out of New York in 1982 uh, by Paramount Studios and NBC for Family Ties. So I did an
Wow.
audition in New York City in the spring of 1982, and next thing you know, I found myself on the West Coast, and I'd never ever set foot in Los Angeles before I came out to do that show.
What a time. I mean, just some of the names that you mentioned that were part of your class, so to speak, that you came up with. Like for me, I find that so fascinating because I see you and I see them as these people who I've watched who were on film and television, theater, but yet like you knew them in a different circle. Like, so I imagine you see them differently in the sense of like, I don't know what kind of, or if you keep in contact with any of those people, but it's a different perspective for you because you're part of this world that's so different, like, and everything else. And as a sidebar, Family Ties, of course, you know, a part of everybody's life for a very long time, which I'm surprised that's not one show that they've tried to, in the age of new boots and everything like that. Has that conversation ever floated across your desk as far as if you would consider it, or is it just something that has existed and it is what it is? Leave the good stuff alone, I
Uh, I,
say.
I would venture to say it's more of the leave the good stuff alone
Yeah,
variety. Among other things, the man who was the brains and the heart behind Family Ties has since passed away. Gary David Goldberg was his name. He was a wonderful producer, and he really was the heart of that show. And other people who were writers on that show, brilliant, who made it so wonderful, who made it uh, so easy to say those incredible words. Uh, they've moved on to other things, and I don't think anybody's interested enough in rebooting it with any of us, certainly. And it's a different world now. That was a world where people from the '60s, left leaning people and right wing people, our own son being one of them, could still have pleasant conversations. It wasn't the dog eat dog, pulling out hair. People are enemies. We
yeah,
were. It was a to use one of Bush's, a kinder, gentler republicanism and politics at that time. Ronald Reagan was president at the time, and there were differences of opinion, but no open warfare. It's crazy right now what's happening, and I wish they'd all watch uh, um, a few episodes of Family Ties. Some of the people in Congress right now to see that you can be on opposite sides of the coin, that same coin being America, and still love one another and be friends.
yeah. I think just from my perspective, that was one of the challenges when the Murphy Brown reboot came around. They were trying to maintain that nostalgia of such a great show, but yet keep up with the politicism and all the things of today. And it was hard because, like you said, your show was so different. I mean, we've watched episodes um and introduced my son to the show here and there. Not Tremors yet. We'll get there eventually. I'm looking forward to that day, but a little too young for that. But just the funness of a great sitcom that tackled topics, personal issues, family matters, so to speak, but yet was able to sometimes resolve it at the end of a 25-minute episode, or maybe you would have the cliffhangers and things to continue on. When people meet you, is there, can you tell from the person what genre they might fit into for your world, whether it's the Tremors franchise, Family Ties, maybe Suits? Like, are you a good read of people when they come up and introduce themselves?
Uh, Not always, not always.
Okay.
I will occasionally go to these. I haven't. I did one of those sci-fi horror conventions earlier this
Okay.
year, and was the first time in about 8 or 10 years that I had done one of those. And I hope, if things work out, if schedules work out, to do one in Chicago, my hometown, in early August. But I'll give you an example. I assume most people are there for Tremors, but there are as least as many people there who are very fond of Family Ties and will occasionally surprise me when I see. I mean, it's not unusual for me to see some guy who's completely covered in tats, maybe has a mohawk, looks like a diehard Tremors fan, looks like he's just double parked his Harley outside, and he will say, "Man, you were the best father. I loved you on Family Ties. That's why I'm here."
I love it.
And I'm going, "Oh my God." I mean, I just assumed this was a Tremors fan. And no, it's Family Ties all the way, and he loved it. And I never had a dad. I had an absentee father. You were like my dad to me, and all this sort of thing. And I'm completely blown away, proving once again you can't tell a book by the cover. And so I'm surprised at times. And then these people who look totally normal, attorneys and financiers who come up to me and will be able to quote lines from every Tremors. And they say, I watch it once a month with my friends. And I go, whoa. So these are people in suits and ties, so it's hard to tell who's who, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, for me, it would definitely be Family Ties. That would be my connection, but definitely Tremors too. Obviously, I've seen all of them. I've seen the series. Um, Man, when you took that crew out for the sci-fi series, I was really hoping that would have been one that would have lasted for a while. But having done this for enough time, I know it doesn't always work that way. Like you show up, you do your amazing work, the writers do their everybody involved in a project, but then it's others oftentimes that make the decisions um,
Absolutely.
on
And
whether or not a show will continue based on what I consider to be interesting data, just to be politically correct about it. It's crazy, like how this works now, especially in the age of streaming. I
right.
don't get it sometimes.
Well, I will tell you that from the beginning, unfortunately, the Tremor series was what you'd have to call a bad marriage. They hired the original Tremors people. We were just ending Tremors. Oh, we were between Tremors 3 and Tremors 4 when it came to this series. And as a matter of fact, I think I left the series, that whatever it was, 10 or 12 episodes. I did not participate in the last episode or two because I went away to do Tremors 4. Um, but the series was just there was never quite any agreement about what it was supposed to be like. You hire people who you love for what they do and what they've done in the past, and then a network will say, "That was great. Do something different."
Yeah.
And you go, what do you mean? Or we don't want what you did before. We want something completely different. Uh, they wanted a different monster every week. We were mostly about the graboids and the evolution of those underground monsters. They wanted completely different things, and they ran episodes out of sequence so that it was not making sense even to people who thought they knew what was going, who should have known what was going on. They Things were done purposely by the writers in sequence so people would get the hang of this thing, and they ran episodes out of sequence, and I was scratching my head. I go, well, I'm not following the story. So anyway, there's some great people in it. It was wonderful working with Christopher Lloyd. I've always liked Chris's work, and he appeared a couple of times, and some of my favorite times were with him. You mentioned Suits earlier.
You've
Sarah,
done a lot of amazing projects
well,
throughout your career.
I've been very fortunate. Suits, Sarah Rafferty, who played uh, Gabriel Mock's secretary on Suits, the red-haired uh, lady. She appeared once or twice on the Tremors series. She made a guest appearance. Sarah did. I found her absolutely engaging, and coincidentally found out she was also a School of Drama graduate at Yale, from Yale, a more recent graduate, obviously. But uh, there's some wonderful casts, and I think some interesting writing, but um, the network and the creative people were not agreeing on things. And
Sure.
so it was probably best that it was put out of its misery. Let's put it that way.
That's funny. You mentioned that like you do something and it's a hit, and then like the people come in and go, no, 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 we want this. I've spoken with other actors, great people like yourself, where they've done things. Paige Davis of Trading Spaces always comes to mind because after that show ended, they did other things, and she would get casting notices that said looking for a Paige Davis type, and she'd be like, "Hello," or "I'm right
Yeah.
here," and it's like very fascinating to see how that works. I could talk about that with for hours, but I digress. I'm interested to know, like, you've done so many amazing things in your career. Um, when you start a project for you, or just in general, sometimes it's usually the journey of getting the role and then the journey of filming it, or if it's a series, filming the series. Sometimes they're separate journeys, sometimes they're joint journeys for you. When you do a project from start to finish, is it one linear journey for yourself from booking it to filming it to getting it out? Or is it maybe in your mind a separate experience where you're preparing for one and then doing it on the back end? As far as what if that question, it's a big, broad question, but I'm interested to know as an actor, like your process, like how does it work for you?
All right. Well, I can explain with something that's coming up in about a week from today. I'm beginning work on a Netflix Christmas film,
Okay.
and this is something tentatively entitled "The Merry Gentleman," as in "God rest ye, merry gentlemen," and it will probably be broadcast um, November, December, holiday time, 2024. And I think I was largely hired because I'd worked with this director before. He knew me. He said, "You were the first person I thought of for this role. I am the father of the lead young lady in this thing." And, in those Christmas films can be somewhat formulaic. That is to say, there's love involved, a young lady and a young man,
Of course.
and helping to save Christmas and all that sort of stuff.
I love it. I think that's the best. It doesn't get any better than that.
And so I'm playing the father to this young lady who's very much in her corner, and uh, and I will say I have uh, just the process. I received the script. Um, I've there have been I made a suggestion or two to the director about, oh, would it be fun if we tried this or that or something like that. There have been some rewrites. As a matter of fact, this afternoon after I speak to you, I'm going to spend the afternoon looking at some of these rewrites. And so I think the first thing I do is certainly start with what's on the page and say, what is my journey here? What is the beginning of my journey? What is the end of the journey? How far where does this story take me? And how do we convey what this character is going through in as best way as possible?
Love it.
Um, Tomorrow, and that happens in a lot of different ways. How does he dress? I've had one wardrobe fitting, and tomorrow I'm having a second wardrobe fitting for this thing. So you think about what clothes does this person wear? How do they wear them? Is he loosey goosey about his clothes, or is he put together well? These are all the things you think about, and so I have another suggestion or two. I'll just drop an email to the director, and based on a rewrite I just saw it, I thought wouldn't it be fun if this happened? If uh, so, it's all about making the story clearer, trying to make sense of it for myself, and it really doesn't. I everybody comes. One of the difficulties, it seems to me, about doing a film as opposed to doing a play is that everybody comes to the film with slightly different ideas. My
Yeah.
like my castmates. I'm flying blind here. I'm looking at the script and saying, "Oh, this might be fun. This might be interesting. Here's my take on it." Suppose somebody comes in and has a completely different take. It's up to the director to settle that sort of thing. And so it's why in many ways I will broadcast to the director ahead of time, say, I'm thinking of perhaps attacking it in this way. Would you think that would be wrong? Or a specific scene, something I say, putting a slightly different spin on it. So we're not all surprised when we get on the set because, as you don't have a lot of rehearsal time. You come to the set with your lines learned, and you're put through your paces. You're blocking for the camera. You may go through it a time or two, and basically, there's not a lot of time to work on it. So it's a very, very different process than it is, let's say, doing a stage piece where you may work on something for weeks and say, let's try this, let's try that, let's go down to blind alley, if you will. Let's make a wrong turn. Let's correct that turn if it doesn't work. If that you find yourself at an impasse in that blind alley, let's say, well, that obviously didn't work. Let's try this. And um, that I find one of the most fun parts of the whole process is the rehearsal period, where you're creatively you're off your leash a little bit. Let's try this. And sometimes then you have to realize you have to shorten the leash at some point because something's not
Yeah.
working. But you don't have that time for in film. Some people do. I've been in, but it costs money. To see, that's the
Yeah, there's
point.
not a lot of workshopping a Netflix feature, I would
It
imagine.
it costs money to say, hey, we're going to have a week of rehearsals. I've done that years ago in television films where uh, a mini series in particular I did back in around 1980, 1979, 80, where we had a week of rehearsal with all the actors on salary, coming in and working with the director in a big studio room just to, all right, how do we plan to do this? What ideas are we bringing to the table here? So that by the time we got in front of the cameras, bam, it was smooth. Everybody, we knew we were on the same page. It's a little different in most things. Most Almost everything I've done, you come to the set with your lines learned and you find a way to work together.
I love it. Well, one last question. You've done a lot of theater and you've shared the stage with some amazing people. Is there an actor or two that stands out to you that you've worked with where you maybe learned something from them yourself, or maybe advice they asked you for advice? I don't know how, not to be pedantic, but I don't know how that works. I mean, you've shared the stage. Your theater work is phenomenal and you've worked with some great people.
I have worked with some good people, and I will say, um, you know, there was well, my first film, I worked with Cloris Leachman, who was absolutely, I've watched. First time I saw her was in The Last Picture Show, for which she won an Academy Award as Best Supporting Actress. Young Frankenstein, this, that, and the other thing. Cloris is amazing, and uh, the first time I met her outside, we worked together. I only had scenes with Cloris, as a matter of fact. I had a couple of scenes with Cloris in this thing, and I was still a young actor who had not done much film work. And this was a made-for-television movie for 20th Century Fox, and uh, I just saw her commitment to character. She played an old woman in this, an old woman with saggy boobs, and I mention that in particular because she had to make two huge bags of rice to
Oh,
put in
wow.
her to put in her. And Cloris was a beautiful woman. She was like Miss Illinois in 1957 or something like that. She could she was a very attractive woman, and she was playing this old woman in that, and had a beautiful old age makeup, and this she was this old crone with these two bags of rice hanging down low in her in her under her dress. And I just saw that commitment to uh, transformative acting, and I was most impressed with that. That was in a film. I will mention um, oh gosh, I well, another film, that film I was first first talking to you about. There was there were some extraordinary actors in that. I worked with um, uh, oh my God. Oh, Jason Robards Jr. in that, and his and Eileen Heckert, who
Wow.
were wonderful, film actors and stage actors as well. And Sylvia Sidney was in that. My God, an actress from the 30s and 40s who was in her older age in that time. And I just worked with some incredible people. I over time, and I'm trying to think of great advice. Um, well, Cloris told me to stop smoking, among other things, which was great advice. And I stopped doing that some 40 years ago and never looked back. And uh, she's, as a matter of fact, the first time I met her and I had a cigarette in my mouth and was talking to her. She grabbed it out of my mouth and threw it on the ground and stomped on it. And she said, "What the hell do you think you're doing to yourself?" That was my first introduction to Cloris.
That
Never,
sounds about, yeah, that sounds perfect. I love
never,
it.
never one to hold back her opinions. And but what a wonderful actress she was. And um, oh, I've had almost too many experiences to, I was fortunate to have worked with Betty Davis once upon a time in a Martin Balsam, who was a wonderful actor who probably, I mean, the first time I saw him, or I remember seeing him, Marty Balsam uh, was in Psycho when he played uh, Detective Arbuthnot or something like that, who fell down this has a famous scene falling down the stairs in Psycho. Uh, but just some extraordinary people, and I'm old enough to have worked with some of those people when I was quite young, and was just fortunate enough to work with some, I don't know, giants. I felt really. Um,
Yeah, I would say so for sure. Well, Mr. Gross, Michael, thank you for your time. I tell you, man, this has been a pleasure. I'm so glad we were able to do this. I know you're working on this film and other things, and um, I love how life works. I think if you are committed and you do good work, hard work, and are kind, great things happen. And I feel like this conversation today, just a snapshot of your career, was one of those. So thank you for your time. And
well, it's a pleasure, and let me just correct something you said. Things don't just happen. I think you can work. I see fantastically talented people who work very hard and are very dedicated, and they never get the break. So
yeah,
fate definitely has something to do with all of this.
for sure.
Um, it's just when some things fall your way, it's like getting a good deal in a hand of poker, and some hands are unplayable. You think, how am I going to do this? I'm holding nothing here, and sometimes you just get dealt the most beautiful hands. And I will say this: I've had some good mentors in my life when it's counted, people who have given me good advice. And I think the thing that made the difference is I had the good sense to listen to their advice and put it into practice, as opposed to saying, no, 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 I don't need your advice. There were people who helped me, and I listened to them, and that had a great, everybody needs a friend sometimes, and a good piece of advice, a good teacher, guide, or mentor, and I've had those.
Yes, and that is the actor life in a nutshell right there. Um,